Hi, this is Ibarionex and welcome to the Candid YouTube channel. And today I want to talk about how you can reveal place in an interesting way in a photograph. A lot of us do a good amount of traveling during the summer, and we photograph buildings, locations, different environments in which we're in, and a lot of those photographs end up being nothing more than snapshots. And I think that considering that this is such a real special and precious time for a lot of us, it's oftentimes one of the few times we get to go and dedicate to our photography. So it can be kind of disappointing that we're spending this limited amount of time just making snapshots rather than making really great photographs. So I thought that I would pull some images that reveal sort of place and locations in really interesting ways, and hopefully it will help you whether you're traveling before the summer is out or whether you're photographing in your own community, to really take a look at the elements that are in your environment and try to make really exceptional photographs. The first shot we have by Chip Buddy, taken out in Scotland, shot with a Fuji X100 at 1/700th of a second, or 1/1700th of a second, at 5.6 at ISO 200. This looks like to be I'm assuming to be a hotel or older building, and I really like the way this shot reveals this place within the context of the environment. You have a building that obviously has some wonderful architecture, some wonderful shapes and patterns that repeat itself. And when we think about arriving at a destination like this, we sometimes get so focused on the building, on the shapes, and on the pattern, we don't consider all the things that are around it, and how by including some of those elements within the frame, you provide a context for where we are, and not just what we're seeing in the composition. And I think he or she, whoever took this photograph, does a wonderful job in doing just that. That you have this this growth here, and I'm going to assume that it's by a beach, because I just get the sense that this is like near an area where this sort of descends into a beach or some cliffs or something like that. And then you have these wonderful patterns of clouds that appear overhead, and even though the building takes a very small percentage of the frame, it becomes so much more important to the entire photograph than I think it would have been if you had just taken a straight photograph of the building, in which you're not considering the sky or the foreground here. Think about how many times you see pictures of buildings when people are traveling to Europe or in Asia or in South America, and it looks like an interesting building. It has interesting light and maybe really interesting color and shape and pattern, but you only give it a passing glance. This image is really arresting. It really stops you and makes you think about, wow, what is this building? Where are we? When are we? It has a wonderful sense to it that I think really is added because of how carefully all these different elements are placed within the frame. It's not an easy shot to see, because this is an unusual choice. I'm not sure whether the photographer was responding first to the building or to the sky or what it was, but whatever led them to make this composition, I think they were really, really spot on. Here's a shot by Lee Harris, shot with an Olympus EM10, and he shot this at a very slow shutter speed, about 1/3 of a second, at f2.5 at ISO 1600. Now here we're dealing with an interior. We're dealing with, it looks, it says Arab bath, so it does have that sort of Arab architecture feel to it. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but here you got those archways and the walls of the buildings, all of which are really, really cool. But it's here, the way Lee reveals it is by the use of the light. The light that's coming through this doorway creates this nice shaft of light that leads us into the frame, into this post here, into this part of the arc here with the brickwork. And what he elicits from us is a real sense of mood. And I think part of it comes by the use of the color contrast, because you have the very warm light that's illuminating this part of the arch. This shaft of light, this pedestal here, is illuminated by this warm light. And then you have the light that's falling off, which is a lot cooler. It's a lot bluer. Don't know if he accentuated this in post. He may have. But with that slow shutter speed, there's really no telling whether or not he captured this pretty much in camera. It's possible that he could have, because at that slow of a shutter speed, you're really registering a lot of, the shadow detail and nailing the exposure here for the details here, because it's easy to lose it. It looks like there was some sort of reflected light that was happening here to provide some detail here, because if this was in deep shadow, it would be really hard to pull out all this detail here that's happening up in the corners. And this is just a wonderful example of how you can use an awareness of light to reveal a location, in this case the architecture of a building. A lot of people might photograph this scene with less interesting light, and there they would be more dependent on the shapes themselves to help bring some impact to the shot. But if the lighting was very flat and not particularly interesting, it would be really difficult to pull off an image like that. Again, just like the previous image, it really grabs your attention immediately, and largely it's because of the light, and then the light allows you to really interpret the shapes, the patterns, the actual what it feels like to be within the space. So this is really, really nice. Here's a shot by Gary Radler. No XF information here. And this is a very different shot, because here we're including, people in here, but the people aren't really an important part of this photograph. They're really sort of a gesture. They're part of being able to provide a sense of scale overall. Really, this is about the space, just like the other two images. We have this shore, we have this pier, and then we have this building here. We have this white fence, and he uses this building and these lines to really provide a great graphic element within the overall composition. Imagine just this scene without any of this here, right? You've got this wonderful looking body of water. You've got the shoreline in the distance. You've got these great clouds. And in and of itself, if that was all that was in the frame, it would be a pretty cool scene. I don't know if it would make a really great photograph, but the setting here is just phenomenal. But you want to be able to take it sort of a little further. And here, I think he's trying to tell the story of what this place is and how it's used. It's not just a pretty scene. There's an obviously practical element to the space. And that's exemplified by the fact that you see the fishing poles here, and these people are obviously, they're fishing for whatever fish are in that body of water. But he still wants to make it more than just this pier, just jutting out into this body of water. He uses this really great graphic line that kind of leads us into the frame here, and doesn't dominate it, surprisingly, because here you have these very strong saturated colors. You have this very strong saturated, graphic line that makes this, if you split the frame in half, really makes this like what you would think is like the real heart of the image, but it's not. It's everything that's happening here. And what this does for me is it creates a nice balance to the frame. The fact that you have all this sort of drama with the sky and this great blues and this contrast by this pier jutting out into the body of water. This, as much as we have all these saturated colors, doesn't dominate the frame for me. It serves as a wonderful counterpoint to it, and it makes it a much more complex, much more rich image as a result. It'd be interesting to see what this looks like as a black and white, but I suspect that the color here is really key to making this image work, because I'm imagining this as a black and white, and the graphic things of the image would become that much more important. And I suspect that this stuff here would dominate the scene more than it does currently, because I think that the color palette here, the blue here, the sort of aquamarine here, the blue of his top, and all these other things really play a big role in making this image really interesting. This is a pretty complex composition, but I think it works really nicely. Now here's a shot by Philip Wright. He shot this on film, and we see a lot of this. We see a lot of people photographing, the front of a building that has some interesting pattern, color, signage, posters, so on and so forth. And then they wait for someone to come into the frame to sort of complement and contrast what they're seeing there. What I like about this shot is the fact that this person is sort of wearing black, and all of a sudden they themselves do not become really important as far as being a character in the photograph. It's not like a lot of the street photography you see where people will set up a photograph in front of a interesting setting and wait for a quote-unquote character to come into the frame. Someone is wearing a colorful hat or outfit, and it's really more about them, and the background is more of a setting for that. Here, it's still about the scene. It's still about the doors, the windows, the color of the peeling paint, the language here that's on the walls, the Pepsi sign that's up above the store indicating that this is some sort of store or type of bodega. And then this figure here, by just being almost completely black except maybe for their hand there, if that's their hand, is just this negative space. It's just this big block of negative space that just complements everything else that happens here. Imagine this shot without this figure in the frame. It would still be this huge scene here that we have and has some interesting elements, but this area of negative space, this figure makes the shot for me. It makes it interesting because there's a contrasting element that's within the composition. By having this figure in the frame, it's the telling gesture. It's that one element that really elevates this image from being yet another photograph of an interesting facade or a building that really isn't much to write home about. We see a lot of these shots. I mean, great color. I mean, everything here would draw practically any photographer's attention, and they would make the shot and walk away, and they'd come back and they'd take a look at the picture and go, oh, that's a really nice picture. But it would not arrest most people's attention, especially if, like us, we see a lot of these pictures. Having that figure and waiting for that figure and making that figure being just an accent to the overall composition elevates it, I think, and makes it a really exceptional photograph. So I hope you enjoy this. We have so many people adding to the Flickr group. It's amazing. Sometimes I just spend way too much time taking a look at the photographs that are up in here, and it's just astounding stuff. So please continue contributing images there. Fortunately, I'm not going to be able to do videos on all the images that are there, but hopefully as you go through the collection that we're gathering here from all these different photographers from all over the world, you're going to get some wonderful inspiration for your own photography. And if you haven't subscribed to this, please, you'll see a button right here to subscribe to the channel so you can see the videos as they go up. And if you've never heard of the Candid Frame, you can visit us as thecandidframe.com, where I have a podcast which features conversations with some of the world's best photographers. And within a very short time, I'll have over 300 interviews up there, which is just amazing to me. But check it out. You'll be introduced to some photographers you've never heard of, plus some that you probably have, but all of them will provide something to help encourage your photographic journey. So thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next time.